Hi. Sorry to interrupt the interesting chats that are going around, but we are already a little bit late for this session. This session is supposed to give a little bit of a context and a summary of what's going on in each of the working groups. So working group 1 focused on theory, working group 2 focused on policy making, and working group 3 focused on practice. So Ricky and I will start with working group 1. We were trying to see if Limor was available to join us online, but it seems that she can't make it now. So basically what we are going to bring you is a little bit of a project that is ongoing. So one of the outcomes of working group 1 is a research digest. And just to remind you that the research question that guides working group 1 is how can the challenges and changes that are happening to careers in the contemporary world be understood. And so thinking about this research digest, we try to organize what we mean to reflect on. And so we thought about focusing it on 4 dimensions. On the one hand, why are careers changing? Or are they really changing? So in this sense, to identify both changes and continuities in terms of the structural causes of career challenges. Then the second part of this question is what are these challenges in careers? And here we can address basically working group 1's first subgroup, Careers in Crisis. That's the title of the subgroup in the contemporary world. And so this would be forms of disruption, for example, precarity, automation, work intensification, the green transition, and AI. And some of these challenges have been building for a long time. Others are just starting, like the AI or the green transition or the potential green transition. The other dimension is how is this experienced individually? So what are their psychosocial consequences? So here we would focus on the individual experience of work. And finally, what to do about it. And this brings us to the subgroup focused on career imaginaries. So basically identifying emancipatory and counter-hegemonic responses to these challenges. And so the other subgroups are basically here in a more kind of examples of these challenges. And I'm just going to present the team that is working on this. So basically, Ricky, Limor, and I, Malika, who is hopefully joining us online from Turkey, Sanya, who is here from Serbia, and then Sana, also here from Norway. And the idea is that we will bring different contributions in order to make this a transdisciplinary analysis of the issues, kind of a diagnosis of the problem and looking forward in terms of implications for policy and practice. And now I'm going to give the floor to Ricky for the structural causes.
So thank you very much. This will be building in some respects on the keynote talk as well, in terms of when we think about career, and particularly career guidance, as mentioned in the keynote, it very much comes from the agentic lens in terms of what does the individual do, or what C. Wright Mills would talk about the private troubles. But as we're well aware, I mean, in some of the conversations I've already had today, you know, when we think about our careers, there are many structural barriers in relation to our careers. And our career trajectories are likely to be influenced by our social position, whether that's class, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, whether we're able-bodied or not, etc., etc. So, and we need to acknowledge that this is occurring in a globalized world, and we need to think about the way in which neoliberalism, positions us to become atomized, and to view our careers as an individual pursuit. So individualization is a main means of a form of socialization that promotes individualism as a value. And career guidance and career policy very much has fallen down that trap for many years. I know it's been challenged very recently in what could be described as a social justice turn, and this is something that we want to explore in a lot more depth. So in terms of the intensification of economic competition, that we view our peers as competitors rather than looking at career collectively, and that we are therefore in a state of loss of power of multinational corporations and global capital power, the undermining of national policies, the reshaping the organisation of labour across the world, and risk is transferred from institutions to the individual. If your career goes belly up, it's your fault, not the structural parameters. So the neoliberal restructuring of labour, we can lean on the important theorists in terms of Harvey, Standing, Borman, Gores, Meda. In terms of work has been increasingly commodified and subordinated to market logic since the 1980s. So labour is deregulated. We've seen a decline in unionisation and the union movement. With the emergence of decent work in 1999 as a response of the ILO. We see profit, competitiveness, and individual success as values, again linking to this atomizing of society. And where we see the devaluing of ethical and moral guidance as unproductive and useless or undermining solidarity. So the welfare state is defunded, weakened, and there's no such thing as society, and there is no alternative since the neoliberal policies have been instilled in prominent Western countries. So when we think about structural causes and career challenges, we need to think about economic crisis and austerity measures, which cut important public services, which are particularly important for people in social positions that require those services. So neoliberal capitalism is characterized by macroeconomic shocks that impact career conditions. And this is where we see some of those changes you were talking about, as well as continuities as well. So the normalization of austerity measures, increase inequality, and reduce social and collective protection, and increased unemployment, insecurity, and precarious forms of employment, and also underemployment, and as you were talking, underpaid as well. So this creates a labour market where uncertainty is not an exception, but a durable condition, especially for younger and more vulnerable groups. And it's worth acknowledging that these risks and the fear that comes with those risks are not evenly distributed. Again, it relates to one's social position. So the lessons, we can also learn, much of the social justice turn within the career studies literature has very much been attacking neoliberalism, and rightly so. I'm not disputing that. I think it should be attacked, and we should deconstruct it and pull it apart and show not only how it's oppressive, but also the ways in which we can counter that. But I think what we also need to take into account and learn from Southern scholars is the way in which neoliberal capitalism is entwined with projects such as patriarchy and colonialism and neocolonialism and sort of like coloniality. And I think that's sometimes overlooked as well. And I think I was really grateful that you presented sort of like the global picture in relation to that. And we talk about globalization, but hasn't there always been sort of global markets that have always benefited the West when we think about sort of colonial history? But I get the sort of slight differences, but they're all, and this is why I wanted to emphasize, we very much talk about change an awful lot when we address inequality and these issues, but there's an awful lot, there are stories of continuity here underneath the surface, so to speak. So we can learn from the third world is really rich in resources. So how has it ended up being so poor? So we need to think of the way in which they're not developing countries, they're overexploited countries, to use the language of Parenti. And neoliberal capitalism is an in-time project, and relies on, this is where epistemology links with material conditions. It's the epistemological discourses of hegemony that justify the flow of resources in certain directions. Oh, there's one more. I thought it was
Two
time
more,
to hand
two
it.
more,
Two
two
more. I'll keep going then. And as part of these significant changes, I'm not saying that the changes should be discounted. I try to think about it as like whitewater rapids. So there's a lot going on the surface, but underneath the current of material resources keep flowing in the same direction. So, but what we see on that bit, the fluffy bit on the top, is a rise of automation, robotization and technological displacement, which reduces the need for human labor or justifies the getting rid of people in these big tech companies in which you were talking about in the keynote presentation. So we see unemployment, underemployment, precarity, et cetera, that comes with that. And it contributes to the fragmentation of employment, atomization of work. So it continually seeks to atomize the worker and survey the worker as well. And we give how much information and knowledge to these companies, which we should own, but we don't own that means of production. So forces people into permanent adaptation, the pressure to lifelong learning that recognizably individuals for continuous training. So with change comes the forces to be agile, which comes with needing to adapt and have the resources to adapt. And again, not evenly distributed. And it promotes the proletarianization of workers, always struggle with that word, and changes individuals' relationship with work. One more. Okay. So, and we need to acknowledge that when we think about social justice, it is in complete relation to climate justice as well. And we need to think about the way in which we're positioned in relation to climate catastrophe, and how that's, again, unevenly distributed and people who are positioned differently in terms of their social position. So climate crisis, green transition and labour and restructuring. The climate crisis may reshape sectors, occupations and skills demands, and the green transition will certainly do so. So the important point is not only that new jobs may emerge, but that many existing careers may be disrupted by shifts in regulation, technology and economic priorities. So, in a critical career framework that this digest is looking to do, this transition should be read not just as technical adjustment, but as a social and political reorganisation of work with psychosocial effects. And talking about psychosocial effects, I'll hand over to Mariana.
Yes, and I was here, trying to do something else at the same time because Limor is apparently available to join us now. So let's see if everything works, because when you're doing hybrid, well, we don't have a camera, no problem. Let's go. Well, admit Limor, and hopefully... Hi, Limor, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Okay, let's see if we can, if it's just this, or if it's much more complicated, and then it will be a problem. Okay, Limor, can you talk, please?
Yeah, but I can't see you.
Oh,
I see
okay.
just
So
like
it's okay.
something
Don't
like-
worry. We can see you. That's the most important part. So basically, yeah. Just wait a minute.
We can see it.
I think that it will be able when I share my screen. I think that we will be able to see Limor. So Limor, basically we were just hearing Ricky. Now I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'll give you the floor in the meantime. Okay? Just a moment. Can you see the screen, Limor?
Yeah.
And you can't see Limor, but you'll be able to hear her, sorry. So basically, we were talking about the structural causes of career changes. And now we are briefly going to hopefully very briefly, talk a little bit about a characterization of careers in crisis. And so what does this mean in practice in terms of the work? And then we'll talk more a little bit about the psychosocial experience of work. So basically, this entails an erosion of labor rights and social security, mostly in terms of weakening of income security, social and political representation, various forms of precarious employment that create instability and insecurity. And so the idea that precarity has become structural. So, for example, in Portugal, after the financial crisis that had an impact and created an economic crisis in the country, what you had was a change, were changes in labor law to make it easier to dismiss permanent employers. So basically, it's not merely a temporary labor condition, but it becomes an existential and structural experience. Besides, of course, career discontinuity, we already know about fragmented and discontinuous trajectories of careers, but also work intensification. So basically how workers face increased demands of higher productivity, of greater flexibility, in which they are the ones that have to adjust and adapt to an unjust world, but also more intense performance performance pressure that then destroys ethical dimensions. And so here we are talking, for example, what I will later mention, the concept of souffrance developed by de Jour. But also bullshit jobs, or what Graeber discussed as the bullshitization of jobs, something like that. So how all jobs then become increasingly useless, with no social meaning or point or purpose. So the way that you spend your life in meetings after meetings with no real aim or social value. But also the platformization of work and the algorithmic organization of work that basically reduces workers' agency. There's also an unequal distribution of uncertainty and of the power to cope with uncertainty. And this then creates individual challenges. On the other hand, and now I'm going to, sorry, have I missed anything? No. And now I'm going to give the floor to Limor to talk a little bit about the organizational dimension. Limor.
Okay, so I hope you hear me, and I'm sorry I can't come physically or arrived. I'm going to talk a little bit and really short about the dark side of career, which is a very famous and central research area, and it includes problems like managerial practices as abusive supervision, aggression at work, harassment, ethical changes, instability, exploitation of employees, and also such a sub-research area as anxieties and organizational misbehavior. And in the organizational misbehavior, there are also sub research area like theft at work, lateness, inappropriate behavior, involuntary turnover, and also shouting on the boss, and so on. I must say it can be, if it's a quantitative research area, so or research method, so it can be antecedent, but it also can be, for example, outcome in quantitative research, as I said, and it's also, and there are also very famous researchers, scholars that are doing qualitative research about these phenomenons. So this is the sub, area that I'm also working on. I'm working on turnover. I mean, turnover that is planned, that people are playing to leave, but they're not letting the organization knows. So there is a lot of problem with that. So this is, as I see this research area, and if there is and if there are any question, I'll be happy to answer about this area.
Thank you, Limor. Thank you, Limor. We'll leave the questions to the end. I'm sorry I moved too quickly. But basically, the idea is that in this context of careers in crisis, the most vulnerable are always the ones that face the greatest challenges, be it in terms of gender, race, disabilities, geographical location, and so on. And so, thinking about the individual experience of work, we are talking about career trajectories that are no longer protected by stable institutions, but that are shaped by competition, flexibility, the constant need to prove worthy of your employment. So this impacts how people understand themselves as workers. Careers become then individualized projects. Failure is increasingly framed as a personal matter rather than a structural one, and people believe that the only way that they can cope with their challenges at work is individually and not socially, and not understand them as social issues. And this leads to a pressure to self-manage, self-promote, self-correct, and to experiencing feelings of inadequacy, constantly feeling inadequate. So basically, when we are talking about the individual experience of work, we are talking about what I've called an existential precarity, a way in which psychosocial uncertainty, so basically uncertainty that is created socially, economically, and politically, is then experienced individually, and then it permeates all domains of life for those who are most vulnerable. So we can talk about the social origins of depression, of anxiety, of exhaustion, burnout, and poorer well-being in general, and how people who are more vulnerable are led to adopt self-defeating strategies to cope with these experiences. So how people may withdraw, disengage, or basically adopt strategies that reinforce their vulnerability and keep them in a position of disempowerment. This is also related to experiences of fear and distrust towards the other. So, and this could, the examples can be the blaming the victim discourse, in which immigrants are responsible for whatever, and the corrosion of community living that then has a social and political impact. And so there is a disengagement from the future. You can no longer project yourself into the future and think about how you would like to develop your life project, because all of your decisions have to be made in the now. So this also impacts the thinking of alternatives. There is no other possibility. There is no alternative, Tina, and this experience of short-termism. And this is also related, of course, to how this world makes us feel that the only way to cope with it is to excel. And this is what then helps us understand experiences of voluntary servitude, as de Jour calls it, or self-exploitation, be it as an Uber driver or as an academic. And then souffrance as an ethical suffering. So this all has an impact in terms of the meaning of work and emptying work of its potential to provide meaning for existence. So this then has a social and political impact. If we believe that our struggles are only individual and not socially and politically constructed, then there is no need for collective agency, for solidarity, for social and political imagination. And this is also related with a certain disbelief in politics as having the potential to help us with our struggles. And so may also help us understand a little bit of the turn to nationalism and authoritarianism that we are experiencing across the world. So basically, this is a little bit of what we intend to do, of what we are working on. And our aim is to then finish with this emancipatory and counter-hegemonic potential responses, both for policy making and career development, but also for practice. And so here about thinking about the importance of promoting critical consciousness in our clients and students, because it is only by understanding the complexities, or at least understanding a little bit of the complexities of the world in which we are living, that we can then foster some form of individual, but mostly, that's the most important part, collective empowerment to create meaningful career imaginaries and potential new worlds for the future based on reciprocity and collaboration instead of politics of uncertainty and competitiveness. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to invite Teresa Scaramella to give us a little bit of what we've been doing in Working Group 1, so a summary of what's been happening in Working Group 1 subgroups, so that we can hopefully interest more people to participate in them. Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay. I think it's easier.
Yes.
Okay. So this is going to be just a general review, not analyzing systematically the activities in the 5 subgroups, but just giving you ideas of how they've been playing with the roles, the tasks, and pointing to some actions and choices that could be relevant to understand their work, but also could be ideas for other subgroups or reasons for joining these subgroups. I'm thinking and referring to these 5 subgroups along the 5 lines that were clearly identified in Manchester last year, and you see here the names, reference persons for, at the moment, for the subgroups. Basically, what we've seen analyzing the summaries that we received from the subgroups, they've been involved in, first of all, identifying the interest from the participants, at least those that at the beginning shared their interest. They've been involved and busy, for some of them, in particular, in organizing the activities and identifying ways to communicate in the different groups. They have, the proposals, the interest evidenced in the beginning have changed across the last months, but now we see more clearly topics that are interest of the in the subgroups. And also what I've seen across the subgroups, they've developed a document where they shared all the relevant information, or organized a repository where all the members can find information, announcements on activities or proposals they could be interested into. The subgroups have organized their activities. I just show you a couple of ways they've chosen to organize their activities. For instance, this comes from Diversity and Career subgroup. They have 2 types of activities going on along the months. One is short presentations from participants that have the meaning of activating discussion inside the subgroup, but also they are planning and conducting and already implementing some webinars among the subgroup meetings or in connection with. Another subgroup organized the activities with the fixed monthly an hour meeting. Today there was one going on early in the morning, and we have also been involved in this. At the end of each meeting, there's a sort of marketplace, as Tanya called it, where actually everyone shares information, news, updates on activities. Some activities already conducted. For some of the groups, the main activity was preparing for this conference, preparing and sending abstract, refining them in order to have them accepted. And so we all will hear about these interests and topics during the 2 days. And but also there has been a meeting, an interesting one. Also, there's my personal interest in this. We had a meeting in April, which was focused, among the other things, on the notion of inclusion and conceptualization of inclusion in career development, which I found and the participants also found very interesting and promising for future developments. And we started talking about this morning at breakfast. But also we've seen actions that were interesting for the participants. Grants already awarded and applications for grants, different grants application, and also an Erasmus Plus project that was developed, as well as the organization and the starting of the work in order to propose, to make a proposal for the Horizon call, Choose Europe for Science, and this is in progress. But also we've seen an applied work on a specific topic. For instance, Career Imaginaries group has been working on the literature. They have analyzed something like 1,200 abstracts in the literature. So that's the basis for their work. They're thinking of a review of the literature. And also others have explored the opportunities, and this is in progress for the SDSM. The very next future, so before this meeting, and we all know that there will be more going on and starting from and after this meeting, Diversity and Career subgroup is already organized in May, a meeting, partly for discussing the outcomes from this meeting and also address the intersectionality, career guidance, and career development, which I know is a cross-working group interest. And also we have a webinar in June on migrant women strategies that is proposed by Tanya and Sanna. We have also interest in opening the subgroups to others, inviting other people to join from the general COGAG list, but also from the other subgroups, so to harmonize the activities between the groups and subgroups. And there's still an interest in proposing new project, new grant application, for instance, in the lifelong life-worth learning subgroup, as well as after sharing the interest of the single participants, single members in the subgroup, start with developing activities aimed at producing outcomes that are in line with the COGAG deliverables. And yes, the literature review is in progress, so I think that in the next months we will see concrete outcomes of the activities of the subgroups. And then for the teams we will hear during the conference, if you want more information, please contact the reference persons for the subgroups. Just a small summary.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you so much. Now I would like to invite Petra first. Yeah, and we'll continue with working group 3, then we'll move to working group 2, then working group 3, and we'll leave the discussion to the end. Is that okay? Have you sent me?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so let me. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit briefer, I hope, but I suppose I'm here representing Working Group 2, so Tibor may be online actually, but he couldn't make this week here in Porto. We also have Busra, I don't think is here, but she's joined as communications person for us as well, which is great. I'll just give a little bit of an update on, I suppose, go back to the focus for the working group and report a little bit on the activities to date, some of the planned activities, and I suppose posing a few questions for us to think about going into the future in terms of challenges and opportunities, and the idea of, I suppose, the academic community engaging with policy and policymakers, and how can we do that. So the focus of the second working group is to examine career guidance policy, to examine how the concept of career is addressed in the wider labour market and educational policy, and imagining policies informed by more critical perspectives. So to date, we've held 3 webinars, and the first one we had some really good presentations. It started off with Tibor, who talked about the evolution of career development policy at an international level, and we had some presentations on employability and reimagining career guidance in the age of AI, and also the impact processes of guidance policies and practices. We then had a webinar where we invited John McCarthy from the International Centre for Career Development and Public Policy. So he talked about...
Sorry, it's my Outlook.
Okay. He talked about, again, kind of the development of career-related policy and the multilateral policy development. So he referred to career-related policy from the OECD, CEDFOP, ILO, the World Bank, UNESCO, and a few other large organisations. And I suppose what he suggested was that career guidance tends to be a social policy response to economic and social challenges. So in a way, it's kind of coming as a reaction to the things that Working Group 1 is looking at. But reminded us, I think it's important when you're working in a particular sector, you can be convinced that everyone cares as much about something that you do, but saying that these organisations they're huge. Sometimes careers are on their radar and it's important and it is an element of what they do, but it doesn't tend to be their sole focus. And also, depending on how the wind blows, it will be a reasonably big concern or a diminishing concern. So the fact that policy responses and emphasis in these organisations will depend, are quite unstable and not very consistent over time. And he kind of left us with the question asking, do individual countries need the push of those international organisations in order to embed career guidance in national policy? Would it happen without those big organisations? If it wouldn't, then, if we don't need those big organisations to do that, well, how do we push these agendas within countries? But if we do need the push, then how can we move to a more consistent and sustained emphasis on career and career guidance over time? And how will that look at a national level? We also have the date is wrong there and the link is missing, so I can fix that up if the slides are shared after. But more recently, just about a month or so ago, we had the third webinar where we had some really interesting presentations, again looking at, and I suppose we saw a bit more integration of maybe theory and policy here as well, looking at what constitutes a good career, sad passions and career imaginary, early career related learning, policy responses to that, and also career guidance as a tool for environmental justice. And so where are we going next? In the short term, what might be interesting to do would be to more clearly identify existing policies, to try and surface the the policy logics that underpin those policies as well. And in the long term to ideally shape equitable and sustainable policies at various levels as well. So some of the forthcoming activities, and I suppose Working Group 2 is kind of moving into quite a busy year or two, where the equivalent conference of this is due to be held and organised by Working Group 2 next year. Also the doctoral summer school, and either a policy handbook or a position paper on policy, with plenty of opportunity for members to contribute to that. And then I suppose a key output would be a policy seminar to be held potentially in Brussels as well, inviting and actually bringing policymakers and people from this community into the same room as well, which it doesn't happen maybe all that often or often enough. And so the idea behind that would be to promote and support dialogue. Potentially publishing targeted policy briefs, and then any other ideas from members or people who have already contributed or would like to contribute in the future to contribute with ideas as well for future activities. And in recent conversations, I suppose we've felt, and every cost action or project needs to organise itself and some way, but it does pose a challenge, I suppose, to look at. But how do we integrate policy into Working Group 1 and Working Group 3 and the activities there? And I suppose it just dawned on me when you talked a little bit about funding applications, for example. I suppose policy impact tend to be emphasised and encouraged in funding applications as well, so it probably will progress naturally as well. Move on. So I suppose in looking at policy, we need to consider the policy implications of societal issues and theory, but also the impact or implications of policy on practice. So there are quite obvious links, obviously, between the three different groups, thinking about, well, how do we talk about problems? How do we define those structural problems and priorities? Who do we prioritise in terms of target groups for guidance services, for example? How do we allocate resources? How do we distribute power? And the role of state, the labour market and individuals, so on. And I suppose what makes this project and the conferences different is that we have that common kind of critical perspective, tying things together as well. So to constantly ask questions about the underlying assumptions in policies, to challenge how problems are defined, like reframing these concepts that we after a while become true, like welfare dependency, reframing that to inadequate income security and labour market precarity, for example. And Ricky, I wrote down something you said, even reframing the underdeveloped countries to overexploited. It's just to really consider the language that we're using, I suppose, and to expose hidden assumptions, trade-offs and silenced voices, and introduce alternative values around careers. So, research question that is referred to in the Memorandum of Understanding is, how can policy makers respond to contemporary challenges to individuals' careers? So to identify current policy responses and what perspectives underpin them, and to imagine new potential responses from a critical perspective. But also, it might be useful and interesting to consider, well, how can we on a practical level actually engage with policymakers? And how can our research and critical perspectives actually inform new policy? So there are different ways and layers and aspects of how to engage with policy, I suppose. On one level, we can critique policy and review and explore what's out there already. Sometimes there are opportunities to evaluate certain policies. But also looking at potentially doing policy briefs for national policymakers, for example. Some of us work, I think it's quite common for academics to feel like we're working a little bit in silos, and I suppose that's another emphasis of the project, that we do collaborate across different countries and even sectors. And so there's definitely strength in numbers. So when we're not trying to, well, if we're trying to change a full policy as an individual, we mightn't be all that successful, but as part of a larger group, we may have a bit more success. Sometimes it's unprompted, but sometimes it's in response to public consultations, I suppose, as well. There are definitely certain times that are like windows of opportunities where policy change is much more likely to happen as well. So to really explore ways of engaging and consider policymakers at different levels. So international actors like the ones that John McCarthy was talking about, but also at national levels. Most governments would have science advisors for their governments, local authorities and implementing agencies as well. But you also remember that most policymakers are individuals that tend to be stressed, short of time, often don't have time to read our beautiful long reports or articles, but actually need a one-page brief where we can clearly set out why something is an issue, where the solution is, and how, what your research, how that can be of help to them. And a lot of the time people are civil servants that are moved around from department to department, and they may or may not be an expert in the area as well. And they are also only human. And then I think we have to remember that we're only humans, so to be kind to ourselves when we consider if we want to have a policy impact, well, what does that look like? Is that always, well, this is a brand new policy that's exclusively based on my recommendations, or is it having a slight input, being referenced maybe in a policy or a strategy, informing decisions or informing agendas even for government, for example, or local, at a more local level. But I suppose what most of us want to see eventually is the positive knock-on effects of it, or implications for practice and those at the receiving end of guidance services. Okay, so I suppose I'm just going to leave you with the question of how to really think about, and some of you probably do this all the time anyway, but really to think about how your work, your particular research area relates to policy, because no doubt it does, but it's not always our main focus. And I just promised Tibor I would put up a link to a call for papers as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you want So now I'm going to ask Christina and Norton to join us, and I'm coming here to try and get your presentation, which is already here. Sorry, I'll leave this place. in a minute, and you can come here. Yes. Yes. And you can come here.
I was just saying to Norton, I don't think I've ever sat down for a presentation.
Yes. Unfortunately, this isn't the best organization, but it's the only way that we are sure that they can see us online. Yes, because it's being streamed. So we had to basically ignore the pulpit or the possibility to walk around. I'm sorry.
No, that's
Yeah,
fine.
difficult
It's
for
just-
me too.
Thank you very much. Hi everyone, I'm Christina from Working Group 1. I'm here with Norton.
Three.
Sorry, three. Oh my God. Okay, right, so here we go. Okay. This is a picture from this morning actually. So here we are.
Yeah,
Thank you
very
for bringing
good.
us here. Yes, thank you. Okay, so just a brief overlook of Working Group 3. We've got Jette as well, who couldn't be here today, and then we've got 3 new communication officers just come in, also part of our group, and we'll sort of go through the rest of the participants as well. So, just a brief overview of what we're going to try to spend our 30 minutes on. Obviously the focus of Working Group 3 and briefly on the deliverables. We're going to talk a little bit about the activities that we've done so far. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the critical perspective and what does that look like, how is that understood in the 5 subgroups in our working group. And then we'll see how far how we're going to talk about moving on. We'll see how we go. So the focus, also taken from the Memorandum of Understanding for our working group, is to examine how critical ideas and perspectives are taking up in the practice of career guidance and related educational and labour market practices, to explore how career guidance practitioners respond to shifts in the political economy and policy, including looking at environmental changes and increasingly multicultural and diverse societies. And it is to engage directly with practitioners, facilitating mutual exchange between career guidance practitioners and scientific experts. And what we're going to hear about a bit later from Norton is how the different subgroups are actually working to do this. Obviously, we've only been working for about a year, so we're also in the initial stages, and our deliverables are a bit further ahead than the rest of the project, being Working Group 3. So some of the things we're working on quite good already, and some we still need to figure out how to do. And I'm particularly thinking about the engaging directly with practitioners. What does that actually mean? How can it be done, and what's it going to bring about? So this is the focus of our working group, and we have a point saying key activities and also deliverables. The key activities, what's happened in the last year, I'm going to talk a little bit about in a minute. And the deliverables, equally to the other working groups, we're going to do, or in collaboration with the Ecodoc Summer School, we're going to arrange that, but not until 2028, so we have a bit more time to run. We also have a scientific meeting, equivalent to this conference now. Then we have a practitioners meeting, making it very important to find out how we're going to engage with practitioners and what's that's going to look like. And also a publication of a practitioner handbook, and obviously the work that's been done in the subgroups and how they think about critical perspectives, what kind of activities that lead into is going to be, we hope, the chapters in this practitioner handbook. But it hasn't started yet. We're in the initial stages of finding out how to organise this work, and are still very open to ideas and for obviously for our members to join this work as well. Right, so we have had 5 meetings so far for the whole group. I think we have about 230 members at the minute in Working Group 3, and about 50 people show up steadily at each meeting. So that's what it looks like. Then we have quite active subgroups. So we've had like 20 plus meetings in the subgroups, and obviously meetings between us and the leaders. Then we've had 3 webinars and 1 workshop that we offer to Working Group 3, but also broadly. So we've made it a point to try to push it on LinkedIn and on other channels so people see what's been happening. And then we have our first blog post on the COCAG website that's been written by one of the new communication officers, Isa. Pulling together, what she's done is she's talked about the content of the webinars so far. So that's brilliant that we have somebody to write up what we do and put it together, and this is in a Bourdieu perspective. And I think I've just heard this morning that number 2 blog post is coming up. So we'll be looking for that. So that's great. Just briefly, to give you an idea of what's been happening, we had the first webinar in October from Petra Røise from the University of Southeastern Norway, and she presented a model that she's developed in her PhD work called the 4 C's of career learning. And when we say webinar, it's quite short, it's 45 minutes, I think. So a presentation, but also time to interact. Actually introduce this model to whoever comes to the workshops and says, how does this make sense in your practice? Can you see how this would be valuable to what you do? So that was the first webinar. The second one was with Rosie Alexander from Scotland, but at the minute working in Denmark at Aarhus University. So she's my colleague at the minute, and she presented her work on social justice in rural communities. This was December. So as you can see, there is a structure. We try to have one every other month. And this is by invitation as much as it is for whoever wants to present can contact us, and we've tried to be open about that too. So if you think I have something, you can come as well. The third webinar was last month in April, and this was with Kim Allen and Kirsty Finn. You're going to hear Kim Allen, I think, this afternoon as well, presenting this project, Earning While Learning, Student Employment, Careers Guidance and Employment Rights Literacy. And finally, we've had 1 workshop with Norton. This was February, about generative AI, I guess, in career guidance services. Thoughts on that and how to work with it and so on. So these are some of the things that we have done in the work group. Now we're going to change the focus to talk a little bit about the subgroups in our working group. And obviously this is just a picture showing the same subgroups going across all 3 working groups. And just briefly, what are the critical perspectives? And I guess this is what we've been talking about all day.
Sorry, I just think that you wanna
No.
drink your water.
So I'm going to just jump quickly back to, I guess, the presentations from last year in Manchester. The sort of the starting point of what we said were, what did we think of when we set the critical perspectives, and that what did we base that on? So these were the 5 points presented in the memorandum as well. It's about building a radical imagery. The critical theory poses this idea that things could and should be better, and this is something to focus on. To address the use of power, that all, obviously we're not all equipped with the same amounts, so we should be attentive to power relations. To unmask ideology. That was another one. No, it's fine. That we should analyze how concepts and systems, and also try to clarify how they work and in whose interests they work. View the individual as existing in a dialectical relationship with their context. That if we fail to do both, we might miss something if we only focus on one or the other. Also recognize that human beings have a bounded but transformative capacity for agency. So obviously believing that the human beings have agency that can transform their circumstances, but also that circumstances are not equal for all. So this is bounded. So this is one thing to say, that was the starting point. So now we've been working for about a year, and we thought, So what does this actually mean? This was the starting point. This was the common grounds for us to work in the 5 subgroups of our working group. So we posed the questions to the whole community, and the community being working group 3, and said, how do we then actually think about these things? How do we work with them? How does it shape the activities, the planning of what we do, this be applications or the writing of articles, small projects, ideas and so forth, with these questions? What do we pay attention to? What do we question? What do we challenge? And how does it influence who we interact with, people, institutions or policies? So we asked our members these questions, and they were kind enough to reply so that now we can present how this looks in each of the subgroups in our working group. Over to you, I think, Norton.
Thank you.
Okay, right.
Can I get something like that?
I move.
I'm a little bit. Okay, I'm good. Hello, everybody. So, as Christina mentioned, we have 5 subgroups aligned with the thematic area of COCAC. So, we asked them to share their current activities so far. So, first of all, subgroup 1 focus on careers in crisis. So they have made 5 meetings to build the group structure, first of all, and they made 4 presentations about career conversations and competencies, precarious work and precarity traps, supporting creative students, and career shocks and adaptation. And they are working on the plan reflective piece on language and terminology, especially integrating critical perspective into their process and work. What they do, pay attention in their works, they are trying to integrating concepts such as career, employability, and also critical perspective. And they are working on inequalities in access to support. They are focused on some questions such as who gets excluded from the job market, and labor market shifts as a crisis, and including the quality of work, digital change, climate crisis, etc., and how those kind of crises affect the mental health and capacity for career development. And they challenge some concepts and some question also, like value neutrality of frameworks, like Western-oriented career development theory and frameworks. Do these frameworks reproduce or remedy for inequality, especially within the crisis situation? And what scope do practitioners have to act, and how to move from awareness to policy change, and also how this awareness can be transferred into the critical practice. And how does it shape how they work? They are trying to create a collective reflexivity within the group, and dialogue with the practitioner and institutions, connect to understand the policy action and practice and theory as well. And they are trying to channel tension into the sustained critique.
And we should also perhaps say that we've got 2 people here today.
Okay, yes.
We can say
And
Mickey is here, Christina is here, thank you.
Okay, so
Sorry.
thank you so much for reminding. So in each slide, you can see who are leading these subgroups. And Vicky, Christina, Andrea, and Süleyman are leading the subgroup first. If you would like to join any of these subgroups, please feel free to connect with them during the breaks, or you can always send an email. And the second group focus on lifelong and life-wide learning, led by Gintare, Laura, and Teresa, and some of them here as well. You already met with Teresa. So what they are doing currently, they are making bi-monthly workshops and about the applied career learning, teaching, assessment, and agency, career identity learning. The workshops or webinars or meetings are short, dialogic sections, and it's based on sharing and discussion. And they are trying to move forward, expanding the concept, the topic they are working on beyond the formal education, and include the adult learners and lifelong education across all life courses. So what do they pay attention? How institutions structure career learning, who gets represented by versus challenges, and how social position shapes opportunity, especially social positions of students across class, gender, ethnicity, age, and migration. How do these situations affect their career development? And also they question linear and merit-based narratives. How does it shape how they work? They are trying to design and create the engagement, paying attention to inequality, and they try to center student voices in addition to practitioner voices to create critical perspective into their work and into their process also. And they focus on careers as socially constructed concept and shaped by recognition, access, and circumstances, not by individual merit alone. Then I will try to summarize. So the third group focuses on socio-technical careering, led by myself and Tom. He's here as well. And we made 4 monthly meetings so far across 4 focus areas. We defined 4 focus areas, including funding and networking. And we have 2 research groups in progress right now. One of them focus on examining the role of the AI in mental in healthcare, especially with the nurses. And the second one exploring cross-cultural experiences of career practitioners and their experiences with AI. If you are willing to join any of these research group, you can always reach out to us, because both research groups just are in progress at the very beginning of the process actually. So we have reading group also. We are discussing some contemporary articles about from the perspective of critical perspective regarding the socio-technical careering issues. And as a future direction, we are planning to create some kind of training for practitioners to improve, to support their AI literacy training, such as digital twins or creating chatbot, etc. So we are paying attention to technology design and power dynamics in the technology design, unequal access to technology, and how this situation affect using technology in career counseling processes, and also how these changes affect the career development of the people. And the fourth group is diversity and career, led by Karen, Jill, and Teresa. And they are conducting monthly informal meeting as well. And they have 4 upcoming webinars you can see on the slides. So if you would like to join, you can reach out them as well. They are paying attention to intersectionality, understanding the diverse needs of people, and systemic barriers in the client context, in addition to systemic barriers result from any practice or policy. And they are trying to they are trying to understand and explore neutral guidance reflects dominant norms. and different practitioner responses, question versus conform, they are trying to answer and also look for. And what they challenge what can practitioner realistically do, cost of publishing against the system, what does intersectionality informed practice look like, and power imbalance, and how does it shape how they work. They said that they are still working on it, and it will inform their practices in the future. And finally, Radical Imaginaries group led by Anna, Sana, and Freda, and Anna and Sana are here as well. And they organize their work into the three phases. First phase focus on looking in and outside of the box to critically analyze the situation. And in the second phase, they plan to expand their exploration to create new information. And in the phase third, they are aiming to change the box after these phases. And
There will be a presentation of this later on.
great. So, how do they pay attention? What gets normalized in how career is defined and practiced, and dominant narratives, success, progress, and good career. So, what those narratives exclude or marginalize hidden assumptions. So, as an overview, knowledge, tool, and resources as an output of these 5 subgroups. Each group tried to create some kind of resources or knowledge and tool, including creating a common language and terminology, a policy analysis, workshops series, empirical research, or intersectionality-informed practice guide, or workshop with practitioner and alternative career narratives, etc. And across the subgroups, these are 5 shared concepts, which are these concepts are not neutral, inequalities are central, practitioners are essential. There is a need to move from awareness to action, and there is a tension, but it is productive.
Okay. Yes, okay. I think we're just about to finish up. This is a slide that I stole from Petra's presentation. And it's mostly just to say that obviously these things are the same for all of us. So the challenges and opportunities within Working Group 3 is also how to integrate practice in the wider cost action. So this is pretty much just to raise the flag that when we talk in our group, what does that mean? We can hardly think of a practice that's not informed by theory, and nor can we think about a practice that's not bounded by or constricted by or supported or not by policies that are in place or not. So how do we consider this and talk about this so that we avoid this fragmentation that you were talking about too? So this is just to sort of say, we share these obviously concerns, and to also support that we've got many people that we've seen that today who are working across all the working groups, and this is brilliant. So this obviously is probably going to bridge our work in a good way. But also to keep thinking, how can we keep exploring what we do in the working group so that we can build on each other. And then we are probably out of time, but we did, or Norton did organize a Menti meetup. And we just thought, wouldn't it be fun to take 2 minutes and just say what comes to mind when integrating critical perspectives into career practice? Is it okay, just 2 minutes?
Of course.
Okay. So small. Yeah.
It's a good idea.
What do I do? Oh,
we opened the Mentimeter on Christina computer, but
Can you do it here?
I tried.
Oh, people are still. I think. Oh, it's still there. Okay.
Did you take two?
No, I think it's still there. You can do it. I think. No, it's up there. You can actually.
But I need to enter Mentimeter
Yes, it's probably easier.
if we have time. Or maybe we can share the results later if we don't have enough time right now.
But you can, well, people are thinking.
It's not there.
You're not showing that, sorry.
No,
It's a little bit more complicated than that here. I'm sorry. Yeah, because it's not like that here. I have no idea. Let me see if I can get some help. Maybe we can. Maybe while I try to get someone to help us show this, maybe we could start also with the discussion. So, firstly, thank you so much, Working Group 3. And I'll try to work out how to show you the results of the Mentimeter, but while we are waiting for that, maybe we could use the opportunity for questions, discussion, because I think, well, actually, because we have the research digest in Working Group 1 ongoing, I didn't focus as much on what we've done, but I thought it was also more important to focus on the subgroups, because I think that's one of the greatest challenges that we all have now, is how to work across working groups. So, because we are all focused on the same topics, but through different approaches from theory, policy, and practice. And I think that is the greatest challenge that we have now to think about and solve. So basically, I think it would be interesting now to have a little bit of space for questions, discussion, whatever. And Bill, please use this. So if I could ask for your help so that people at home can hear you. And I'll try to get this to work. Be back.
Otherwise, Marianne, we could perhaps just show it later.
Yeah, sure. But,
no problem.
it's okay.
Is that working? Yeah. Okay. Great. Yes, I sort of had, two. Firstly, it's not. Ah, there we go. It's I think there's lots of work going on, and it's a bit like it's almost bewildering the amount of different issues and ideas and projects that are being nested under the kind of critical careers thing, and I mean they are all appropriate. It's not like I look at some of them and think, oh, why is that there? I think we've done some work already in trying to create simplicity in the papers that we published so far. I think with the paper that you presented, Ricky, you and Mariana presented, that also runs that risk, doesn't it, of there's a lot of complexity. If you're saying, well, what's happening now and how do we deal with this world crisis? And I suppose, I don't know, I haven't got an easy answer to it, but I suppose my gut feeling is don't bite off too much, and like, you know, something that's focused and says these are the top 4 most important things is probably more useful than something that tries to cover like everything that's going on, which is difficult. And I thought there were some really good things in what you've done that really are important that we haven't talked about enough, like particularly stuff about the global south and so on, which this action is not, because it's European focused, it's not like given very much attention to so far. But the one thought I had perhaps for the policy strand, which I wonder what other people here think about, is the world of policy that you're describing is a world that I'm sort of quite familiar with, which is a sort of technocratic establishment in policy. And Alex and I went to this meeting the other week, hosted by Deloitte, where the sort of rulers of the world, or at least their sort of 3 levels down underlings, were there, and they basically told us, you know, human capital theory is the answer to all the problems. Let's sweat the labour harder, but let's kind of give people enough that they don't, you know, things don't fall apart altogether. It's the sort of the message. And I just wonder whether if we're going to be if we're going to take a critical approach, whether we should not talk to those people, because those people get talked to a lot, and whether we should talk to kind of like new left parties, social movements. You know, I mean, we can argue about who constitutes that, you know, but whether we'd be better speaking to like, or whether we'd be better speaking to the Dermos than we would be to speaking to the, you know, Chancellor of Germany. I don't know exactly who's in that category, but it seems to me that one thing that this action can do that's distinctive is raise some of these issues around careers with people who perhaps don't hear them all that often.
Thank you.
Fiona,
Can I just half respond, maybe not respond, but just, I suppose it dawned on me when we were presenting that actually we get the theorists covered, the research, and then we get the policymakers and practitioners, but we sort of neglected the recipients in some ways. They're not one of the 3 big areas that we're looking at. So maybe even moving beyond, maybe let's not go and talk to people who aren't. I mean, this maybe sometimes we just preach to the choir all the time, and that's not great either. So we do maybe need to have dialogue, even if we're on different sides. But at the same time, maybe there are organisations that actually involve, you know, those that have careers as opposed to policymakers. So maybe there is something there to look at. Yeah.
Can I just quickly react to your comments, very useful comments in terms of the digest. I think it's fair to say what we're trying to do at the moment is just map out what could this cover, and then we'll have a sort of filtering process to do exactly what you're saying in terms of strategically thinking what are the most important parameters to focus in on. Our other hope as well is by mapping it quite broadly, we can store that for then venturing down those avenues at other times as well. But yeah, useful comments.
Oh yes, it's working. Yeah, I've got a question which follows on quite nicely from Tristram, and I was struck when I was listening to you, and I was reflecting back to Alex's presentation, and I took some notes as Alex was talking about sort of more, and he's more talking from a more political economy perspective, but how there are different responses to the crisis we're in. So, and I think he listed about 5 different responses, and when I was listening to all of you, I could hear 4 of the 5 things that he described. The one that wasn't in there was about negative reactionaries. Yeah, that was one of the points. But he talked about people engaging in more sort of trying to improve the neoliberal orthodoxy or more positive revolutionary left or social groups and some of the things that Tristram's talked about or referred to. So I was just interested in your reflections about how you would position yourselves in terms of this, how are we responding? And clearly Alex has had a sort of more a political domain, and actually we're talking about careers and work, and people could be doing the same job and voting for different political parties or a different sense of where the politics might go. But I suppose I'm just interested in your reflections as to where you position yourselves and maybe the scope to be a bit more hybrid. Well, you know, I mean, that might be that's what's being reflected here, that there's a hybrid response to these issues, I suppose. So it's your reflections, really. So it's a long question.
And I'm sorry, I'm sorry, but I missed the last part.
Your reflections on where you'd position it in terms of how we position ourselves in relation to that kind of more, the kind of political responses that Alex was referring to in his keynote.
Let me see if I can remember. Yeah, I think that my personal, so more of a personal approach, not necessarily a theoretical one, but is more, I had a note about them. It is always a little bit about the how what is that? I think it was Gramsci who said it. The pessimism of the mind, the will. Or the optimism of the will. So basically, that's how I feel. Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic about the contemporary circumstances, but I believe that they are changeable and that we have a responsibility in that. And that's what I've been doing in terms of research, trying to put that personal belief into practice, both in research and in career counseling with students and clients when I was working as a practitioner. So basically that's how I view that it's our responsibility, in the sense that you were talking about, like, career counseling has had an impact of, in practice, promoting adjustment, and I believe that our responsibility is promoting critical consciousness, is promoting knowledge about the world. And because of another project, the Exploring Green Guidance project, I went to Frank Parsons' book from 1904 or 1909, something like that. And I used a little bit of what he says in the ethics chapter of the handbook that we wrote within the Green Guidance Project, which was basically a part in which he describes how within career counseling you have to talk about economics, political issues, because people have to be able to understand these matters in order to make life decisions. And then he talks about how doing this is talking about ethics, is talking about the moral dimensions of blah, 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 whatever. So basically, this has to be integrated into practice, and this entails our decision regarding the adjustment challenge dilemma. So I don't believe that we have to force people in order. For example, if I think about myself, I've adjusted to this world. Of course I have. But I've also tried within my career and experience to challenge it in some way. But for example, sometimes I feel there is a courage in being, completely anti-establishment. And that has some advantages, but people don't have to do that in order to be aware of what the world is and to contribute to its change. So basically it's that idea. Agency is how we move around within the constraints of our lives, and what we can do to change within what's in our reach, with the understanding and the conscience of the power that we have and the power that we don't have. I don't know if that helps. This was my reflection. It's fine.
I mean, first I'd like to apologize because I was late, but actually part of the conversation we had goes directly into what Tristan just said and also what you were just saying, Mariana, and that also has to do with some things I've been thinking about lately very intensely. One, I completely agree with what Tristan said, but at the same time, I also think that needs to be a multi-level discussion and engagement. Because, for example, with that lady from the Portuguese Psychological Association or Association of Psychologists, when we try to talk to the policy level people, the ones that are in power, from business associations, from the government, different levels, they still think about careers like in the rock ages. It's all about matching and finding the right person for the right job, or sometimes just a job period, right? So this also requires discussion, engagement on our part, because we can have Greenpeace, I know it's just an example, engaged and talking and listening to us, but the reach and the ability to promote change is not the same. At the same time, we always forget a very important component of all of these, the people we work for and with. They are typically absent of all of our discussions. And at the same time, I think that there also needs, it's not just multi-level. For example, if I think about this, and I already discussed this with Mariana, and my apologies if you already addressed this when presenting the research digest, but we have 5 common themes across the action. But we have specific small working groups within each working group addressing the same issues, and we are basically working in silos. But if we want to think about policy solutions that actually work, we need to hear the people they are directed towards, but the practitioners who are responsible for implementing those options, and vice versa. So, and then the theory.
Of course.
Where's our theory in relation to everyday life, everyday people, everyday practitioners, everyday policymakers? So it needs to be more integrated, more holistic, like what we say career is about. It's not just about work or education or training, it's about the person's whole life and how we balance our multiple commitments in multiple life domains. So if we defend this from a theoretical point of view about our field of intervention, why is it that when we start thinking about that field of intervention, we replicate silos, we neglect the full picture, and we don't understand where we fit into and how we can best fit into to best advocate for us as experts in the fields and for all those that can benefit from the work we do. Sorry. React, please.
That's what we were talking about, how to work together across working groups. And that is the greatest challenge that I think we have now. Maybe we should just, and this is something, I've already said this, I don't know when it was, but maybe we should just join subgroup Careers in Crisis from working group 1, 2, and 3. Join subgroup blah, blah, blah from 1, 2, and 3. This was a proposal I did some time ago. And this could be a way to just enhance and ensure that we have the people who are interested in that subject viewing it from a more multifaceted perspective.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Sanja Petkovska from Serbia, and I wanted to react to some points mentioned. Well, first of all, I would like really to go back to simplicity, as Stam say, and to say something maybe a bit different. I see this is also a fetishism of a practice a bit. But yes, I also believe in the end of the day what sort of quality critical reflection is in terms of going to job interview. Are we going to advise candidates to go and respond, you know about capitalism, you are representing capitalism, and then to mess up the job interview? We cannot do that. And certainly in practice, we live in capitalism that is shaped in a certain way, and we cannot actually reach to, companies. There are many levels of policy that are completely not ready to reflect on their own practices, and they don't care about that. That's reality. So it's not only up to us to exit the circle and make change. I think also I would like to reflect of what Mariana said about how do we inspire people to act differently, or what sort of power we give to ourselves when we act in a revolutionary, or how to say, way that is challenging and opposition to what is establishment. And then I think there is a way to inspire change, even not directly, let's say it like that. And I believe that working group, what inspired me to join was this critical approach. And I believe that even though we don't do that directly, by producing materials and discussions and outputs, we can do a lot. We can do a lot still. And I'm not going to join 10 subgroups because I was part of several, and it's very confusing and exhausting. Will be part of one. I will remain sub-leader because I see that people still list me as a sub-leader, okay, and still contact me. It's not a problem. Although I said I cannot do this because I was suffocated with a lot of activities, issues, topics. I was like, what is this? I have to do also something else in my life. But however, I found my way to navigate. And yes, I think we can do a lot also not directly. Thank you.
Just listening to you, I just had a couple of thoughts. So one was a little bit picking up this point, which I can totally see the dilemma there, but sharing accurate labour market information has some transformative potential. It's contingent and it's bounded and it's limited, but it does. People don't all have equal access to that information, and they can't construct their own personal future economic imaginaries on an equal basis. So sharing that is an equalising force in and of itself. The second thing was your point, Petra, about your user groups, if you like. What is there, as an extension of this activity, could you not think about some kind of cohort study approach of hanging on to people who access career guidance as a means of collecting future information about the way in which all the kind of future work stuff is evolving in their lived experience now? And that is something that has radical potential, because those people remain at the sharp end of those changes and are impacted by them. So they have an interest in coming back to reflect on them, and potentially that's a useful transmission belt back into policy. And then the third thing was the radical potential of enough. So part of the kind of potentially risky side of careers guidance is selling people the kind of idea of individual competitiveness and so on, but perhaps selling a radical philosophy of this is enough. You don't need to necessarily go for it if you want to, but don't need to internalize endless competition as a means of self-valorization. So just three thoughts on the conversation so far.
Yeah, but if I may just add something, basically that's, for me, our role as practitioners in this area is always to promote reflection, promote self-knowledge and knowledge about the world. So if I want to think about the world, to understand the world, I have to have some a challenge to view it in a different way to what is or to. So basically, this is doing Socratic debate throughout, not selling whatever you are trying to sell, but promoting a true reflection about how things work, how they are organized, and how you feel about them, and how you would like to construct your own personal life and your life project. And I think this is usually just enough. Because when you are talking, for example, with, and I did workshops for the transition to the labor market of undergraduate students, basically just promoting reflection, and they start to understand what is it that they are transitioning to, and they start to say things like, for the first time, I don't know what I'm going to do in September, because every September I would go to school again, but now what am I going to be unemployed? So what is this transition to? And just giving time and offering time for that. But that is the problem with career counseling, is that often you don't have the time for this kind of more world exploration, self-exploration, and then reflection, action and reflection about your experiences. Usually you don't have enough time to do that, so that, I would say, that is one of the problems.
Can I just quickly come in relation to that? Yeah, it kind of really dawned on me the other day. Like I do a similar thing to that you're talking about, like a sociological approach to employability in our curriculum, and trying to get people to understand the relationship between navigation and trajectory. So this is where you might want to go, but like this is where the forces are likely to take you. And it really dawned on me the other day, because one of my next door neighbours said, "Oh, can you give my son some career guidance?" And it made me realise, like, I've got 20 minutes with this poor young kid, and all he wants to know is my mum's badgering me to make a choice on my A-levels. And it was really difficult not to revert back to, like, you know, the simplistic practices that you were talking about. And so I think it's really key to understand that the important factor is that to do critical career guidance takes a lot of time, a lot of resource, and it's about finding those areas in which to do that. And invariably it gets swallowed up by employability, which is about get yourself a fucking job so that then our goss looks good, rather than the kind of experience that you're talking about. Sorry, did you want to ask a question?
Thank you. Just to build on what has just been said, really, I think it's just so important that we acknowledge how hard this is. I think that is being recognised in the Mentimeter results, but that this is difficult, that it takes time and resource, and that actually we really must work together. And thinking particularly about Working Group 3, I guess that's, you know, so with practice in mind, thinking of those practitioners and how we support them to do that. And I think a key aspect is coming together, facilitating ways that people aren't having to do this on their own. The thinking needs to happen together, and the working out what that means when you've got a person or group of people it needs to be done together. And actually for those clients, students, those that the practitioners work with, if we are seeking to raise their critical consciousness, that needs to be done in groups as well. We can't put, what are we asking of them? And how much, as we are seeking to empower them, that needs to be done. And so thinking about the mechanisms that can make this happen, because it's difficult, it's pushing against the system. So thinking about how we can do that. But I know that's what we're doing here, so I'm going to pass back now.
Thank you so much. My Sanna Toiviainen from Norway. I'm just trying to pull some thoughts together because I'm really inspired by Alex's presentation, and I stopped to think about what you mentioned, the surplus population, and that how it, I think there's something really interesting. My own work has always been focused on those people who never even had the access to this capitalist system and the labor market, need young people and older migrant women. And I think that it's really interesting idea to look and hear those voices and work conceptually and also sort of in practice-wise to develop those approaches and concepts what we use hearing those voices, because I think there's alternative logics found in those spaces in contrast to constant competition and atomization. I mean, I found something which relates to collaborative survival in precarity, something that I quote Anna Tsing, that there's if we think about utopias, so there are some utopias happening in these margins, which might be really relevant for us to then consider in our rethinking of career, that it can be constant competition and self-exploitation, or it can be based on reciprocity and supporting each other in this vulnerable world. So that's one point, that we do have these empirical researchers, and we have through the working group on practice, so we've got access to practitioners who also reflect the lived experiences of their clients in different contexts. We've had a lot of discussions in our own working group. And then another thing is about thinking about exactly how to introduce this into practice and how to actually do this long-term group. I do agree that these are like group processes, so that we can also think about how to deliver guidance in like non-formal settings, working exactly in communities and with non sort of like your conventional contexts. So yeah, I think there's a lot of issues that are going on, and yeah, that was my thoughts.